Now, today's gospel comes from the book of John. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him, about whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe this because I told you that I saw you under a fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." The gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Well, praise and peace be to all of you from our Lord Jesus. When Pastor asked me if I wanted to say a couple words at this service, I said, sure, why not? I'm up for the challenge. And then I read our 3 passages and decided, okay, this is indeed a challenge. How do I tie all 3 of these chapters in together as we hear from the word of the Lord? In the one reading, we have the Corinthians, a letter from Paul talking about morality and sexuality. On the other one, we have from the Old Testament, Samuel talking about calling to Samuel, and more importantly, the wrath that he's going to bring down on the house of Eli for, unfortunately, the blasphemous tongues from his sons. And then, of course, from the Gospel of John, we hear about the Jesus traveling to Galilee to link up with and meet up with Nathanael and Philip. How do these all relate? I pondered this for a long while and read from some of the notes, and here's what I gathered. In all of it, we can see a correlation, an invitation. In all of these, we have an invitation from God. In the first one, when we're talking with Samuel, you hear that God is calling to Samuel, inviting him. And Samuel doesn't hear it at first. He doesn't understand. But eventually, Eli helps coach him and realizes that this truly indeed is a calling for Samuel to be a prophet, an invitation. Now, granted, the second reading from Corinthians is a little bit more of a challenge, but it really is an invitation. If we truly are invited to God and we have the Holy Spirit in us, then our bodies truly are a sanctuary and should be treated as such. It's that invitation to follow God, to help us to do what is right, to follow the right moral and ethics, to look to Him. And the third reading with the gospel, it's really easy. Nathanael and Philip have a conversation in which Nathanael doesn't really understand or skeptical of God. But when he greets Jesus and sees him, and Jesus calls him out and calls him as an Israelite, he comes to realize that this truly is the Son of the Lord. And Jesus invites him into his passage. Invitation. Such an interesting word. Such a powerful thing when you think about it. Invitation. We have all these invites in our life. We have invitations when we were really young. Invites to stay over at a party, a sleepover party. Invitations to come hang out with friends. Invitations to go to class. Invitations to just be with your friends. We get them as we grow in life too. We start getting invites to be part of a basketball team or a baseball team. We get invited to all sorts of social parties. And even later in our life, as we get together, we invite with family. We come together. We invite in the church. All these invitations. It's interesting when you think about it. Why is humans so interested in the invitation? Well, I look at it this way, and I like to share a story. I remember this really well. How many people remember their first day to school really, really well? Well, I can honestly say I remember mine really well. My first day of school, I remember riding with my mom and my older brother Terry, and they dropped me off at the grade school here at the Bellevue Elementary School. And I remember getting clear instructions of where I was supposed to go, but between the car and the half a block to get to school, I was so enchanted and so distracted by all the other people around me, I forgot those instructions. And then I started seeing all these pools of people that were gathered together around and going together as the bell rang into school. And I forgot the instructions. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And here, I am literally the only kid left in the playground by myself, no adult, no other children left there. And I started crying. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried. And unfortunately, I didn't have to cry for very long, but it was long enough, and the teacher took shame and pity on me and saw me out there and guided to me where I was supposed to go. But I remember that very, very well as I thought to myself, what was I feeling? I felt alone. I didn't feel like I was part of anything. I felt like I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I had all this fear and confusion inside of me. I didn't feel like I was part of everything. Here are all these people fit together, and they were all going in, and they were all being part of this community, and they were all being happy, and I felt left out. I felt like I wasn't part of it. And it made me feel really bad. And I share this with you because I think about it as I go through life, and I think about it as I reflected back on the text and the passage this week, how that has an impact on me. Even as I grew up through high school, I think all of you can share some of this. Do you remember all the social groups that formed in your high school, even started in your junior high? All these groups and cliques that you sometimes were invited to and sometimes were not. How did that make you feel? I think sometimes we deceive ourselves and trick ourselves saying, no big deal. But I mean, there really was. There was the populars, the jocks, the sports people, the book nerds, and just the outcasts themselves who said, we're a group of misfits. We like to be different, coming together to share our differences, which is really weird. And that we find it so funny when we don't get invited to those groups. And we write it off to ourselves and say, no, that's no big deal. I really didn't want to be part of that group anyway. We still do that to this day, even as we grow older. When we have friends and family get together and you didn't get the invitation, and you think to yourself, why wasn't I invited? What's wrong with me? What did I do to them? And we don't feel like we're part. We don't feel like we're connecting, and it makes us feel alone and sad. And sometimes we hide it to ourselves. What's even more interesting is when we look at it from another perspective. When you don't do the inviting, how does that make the other people feel? Suddenly, they become the poor 5-year-old that's left on the playground all by themselves, lost and alone, not knowing where they're at with those expressive feelings. Makes them feel sad. We don't do it intentionally. Nobody ever does it intentionally, but it does happen. Now I pause and look up at the camera here, and I'm smiling, and the pastor's going to be reviewing this. He's like, no, Mike, you're way off course. That wasn't what I was trying to do. But I shared this with you because I think it has a point of context. And now, trust me, Pastor, I'll get back to where I was going with this here. So Pastor left me a group of notes, as he always does before he leaves, and we have conversations about what it is, for the topic today. And the invitation is, for this Sunday, one of the primary topics. But he wants to see it from a different light. And I'll help share it. I shared this experience with you because I think it's important. As I reflected this last week and tried to pull these passages together, I realized something. As I look back and realize those feelings that poor 5-year-old on the playground all alone, not being part of anything, I realized that's not truly the way it is. As I look back at the ministries and just even hearing the readings today, I realize Jesus has invited me into his life. Jesus has invited everybody into his life. If you look back at the text and the readings, you realize that who did Jesus sit with? All the outcasts, all the people he wasn't supposed to sit with according to the law of the day. But he did that. He made sure that everybody felt welcome. Everybody had an invitation to God. He didn't judge you whether you were popular, whether you were a jock, whether you were a nerd or an outcast. He opened it up to everybody. He invited everybody into his life. And when you think about that, when you think about the power and the sacrifice that he made to do that, it's amazing. It's a gift. To be able to look at everybody and say, I value you. You are welcome to me. You are important. You are one of God's children, and you are welcome to me. That's what Jesus is. That's what he invited us to do. It's interesting when we look at that because we use some common phrase in our daily lives. We use the invitation of Jesus to come into our hearts. And sometimes we misuse this or misunderstand this, is probably more of the case. When we say that phrase, we say, all right, I open up and let a bit of piece of Jesus in my heart. I carry Jesus around with me. And that's easy to make that assumption because we understand that Jesus is all-powerful. He's everywhere. And it's easy to say that's the case. But unfortunately, when I do that, I'm being a little bit like Nathaniel. I'm putting my preconceived notions on that relationship with Jesus. I'm saying I'm holding Jesus in my heart and carrying him around to follow my will of the day. My will. My selfish, sinful will. And that's not right. It's a little bit like Nathaniel in that. Before Nathaniel even saw Jesus, he already had some preconceived notions. He had the thought, Nazareth. What good can anything come out of Nazareth? He already had that preconceived notion. But when he saw Jesus and when Jesus spoke to him and shared some of his divinity to him, he realized and shed that preconceived notion, and he opened up himself and opened up his heart, which is comforting. In our time of needs, when we're down, when we have all of ourselves and all of our sinful ways, and we have the stresses of life and even some of the sadness of life fall on us, it's sometimes nice to know that we can reach out and that you won't be alone on the playground. You will not be that little kid crying by yourselves because Jesus is there. You will always be welcome to Jesus as long as you follow him. Now, it's important to note that I use the invitation in terms of us to somebody, but it's really us following Jesus. That's the invitation to do. Us to go out in this world and follow our footsteps in Jesus. Because sometimes we take our preconceived notions and we wrap them around ourselves. We wrap them around and say we give ourselves the right to do this, and we don't even mean it in a meaningful way. It just happens. But when we truly look and follow and ask what Jesus follows us to do and follow his invitation to follow in his footsteps, that's when we follow ourselves in the right way. That's when we go on the right path. I share one last story before I turn off and continue the rest here. I'd say June of this last year, me and my wife, my oldest daughter, Adrian, my youngest son, Ryan, and my middle daughter, Claire, all got the opportunity to go out to San Diego. We were out there for a couple days, and then we traveled north up to Anaheim, where we got to go to the wonderful world of Disneyland. If you haven't been there, it's quite magical. I share this in all the excitement and all the fun. We had some challenges of that trip. My wife had a very nasty whooping cough. My son Ryan also had a very nasty cold, double ear infection. Didn't sleep. My youngest daughter, my middle daughter, of course, Claire, super excited, didn't get a lot of sleep that night. Needless to say, we all didn't get a lot of sleep at night. So we were all pretty stressed by the time we got up to Anaheim. But we made it through the magical day of Disney, and even though we had the stresses of the day, and there were numerous of them, we still had a good time. And I share this with you because as we're pulling out of Anaheim, going along our way, we happen to be driving along and we happen to see a homeless man. Somebody standing alongside the road with a sign saying, please, please, whatever you can do, support me and my family. We are out of work. And I share this with you because what happened is I looked into this man's eyes as I was driving, and I've been around a lot of places. I've been many places on the earth, and I've also, unfortunately, been in a war situation. And I can tell just by looking in this man's eyes, he was down on life. So, we paused, we stopped. My wife looks at me like I'm a little bit crazy. I know my eldest daughter looks at me like, what are we doing? And I stop and pull out whatever I had in cash and give it to the man. And I move on, and I think I'm doing good. And I did good for the moment. I share this with you because I also shared this with Pastor, and we've taught. He's done similar things, and we both laughed and joked about this. I did the good for the moment, but did I do the good for the all? I helped him in the need, but did I help him in the long haul? Did I truly invite that person in? Yes, I was doing a good deed, but was I doing the thing that Jesus would have done? I gave him money, and I moved on. The reality is, as you talk to it, I should have invited him in. At the very least, I should have listened to his story. I should have given him the time of day that he deserves to ask and say, what brought you here? How did you arrive at this spot? treat him like a dignified human being and helped listen to his story and shared it. And I look at that, and I use this as a context, and I realized as I was reflecting on the day on this topic how important that is. That I have these preconceived notions that, hey, I should just hand this money out and everything's going to be good. And that is not right. And that is why I am invited to follow Jesus. That's why I'm invited to follow these passages, to see what Jesus would do. In that case, Jesus would take him in and listen and follow his story and treat him like the human being is. Therefore, give him hope, make him see life as it truly is. And I end with this note with the question. What will you do to follow in Jesus' footsteps? Will you follow the invitation?